My name's Gary Meza. I'm a retired lieutenant from the Huntington Beach Police Department. I was there for 31 years. Since 2000, and thank you. Since 2001, I've been a facilitator at the Museum of Tolerance for their Tools for Tolerance for Law Enforcement program. I'm also a member here at the staff at the Criminal Justice Training Center. I teach a 10-hour block to the academy recruits on cultural diversity. And I'm here to talk today about a program that the Criminal Justice Training Center is bringing to Southern California law enforcement. Not a problem. The dialogue, the national dialogue in law enforcement right now, law enforcement's taking a beating. About a year and a half ago, the dean of the Criminal Justice Training Center, Chief Ron Lowenberg, asked me to do some research into a new program that was being introduced to the country called Fair and Impartial Policing. The more that I did the research, the more excited I got about the program. We arranged for a Train the Trainer program. I went through that course and we implemented it. We felt so strongly about the program that we implemented it into the academy. We teach it in the beginning of the academy to the recruits because we want them to realize what implicit bias and what implicit bias is and how it affects them and how it affects the way that they deal with people, the decisions they make. Fair and impartial policing brings the modern science of bias to police work, and it changes the way that we look at people, the way we think about people, the way we deal with people. Yesterday, I presented a 2-hour introduction to this program to the Orange County Chiefs and Sheriffs, and then later in the afternoon I did a 2-hour presentation to the San Diego County Chiefs and Sheriffs. Like I said, we're bringing this to Southern California law enforcement. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you just a little bit of what the program looks like, kind of give you an example of what we saw. My 2-hour program is going to be really compressed down into 20 minutes if I can keep that. The science of bias. Researchers have told us that bias is the thought of bias is outdated, that most people think about bias now and they think about explicit bias. It's that obvious hate. When you think of like a white supremacist and they're just spouting off about a particular group that they absolutely hate, that's explicit bias, and that's outdated. Police departments and the community, that thought that police bias is explicit, it endangers the way that we deal with that we talk about this, and it's negatively. It impacts the role that it has on law enforcement. This is the destructive equation. Officers with explicit bias or biased police officers result in biased policing, and that's not the way it is. This, like I said, this distorts the way that we deal with this. It distorts the dialogue between the community and the police departments, and we can't have constructive dialogue as long as this is the way that we think about it. Police also minimize the problem. Officers, you tell them that they're biased. You see this in the news all the time, that they talk about the racially biased police department or the racially biased officers. And the officers are going, I'm not biased, I'm trying to do my job. So they try to pull back a little bit. They don't want to be involved in the dialogue. And it's inaccurate, it's the way that bias used to be. Science tells us that even well-meaning police officers can do biased policing. And the bias impacts their behavior, it impacts their decisions, and it impacts the way that they look at people. And it's in the form of implicit bias, it's not explicit bias. Implicit bias is what's what's in the back of your mind. It's things that maybe you don't even think about. So in order to change the dialogue, in order to improve this dialogue with the community, we need to move away from this outdated thought that bias is explicit and it has to do with racism. And we have to expand it that even the best police officers may have bias, may be doing biased policing. And even the best police departments, because they hire from the human race, they may have biased policing in their communities. So we need to talk about science. Social psychologists have done studies, countless studies, on implicit bias, and this is what we use in the program. This is what we teach to the officers. Implicit bias, as you're walking around, you're constantly being bombarded with information. You're constantly receiving things. As you're walking, you know, what's going on around me, who's coming, who's walking away from me. The fight or flight inside of you is evaluating what's going on, and you're processing all this. Your mind's processing it, but you don't even realize that it's going on. The important things that you think are important, you kind of focus on, you see those, but you're constantly being bombarded with all this other information, and it works below the conscious level. Malcolm Gladwell called this blink. And it's where you thin slice things, where you see things and you evaluate them, and sometimes you process them and you don't even realize that you're doing it, and you make judgments about things, and you don't even realize sometimes where those judgments come from because it's in the unconscious level. The blink response, we categorize people, we stereotype people, we do it immediately, we do it unconsciously, we don't even realize that we're doing it. And scientists call this ambiguous stimuli. So when you see someone and you don't have any information about them, you fill in those blanks with stereotypes. You fill in those blanks from your past experience, what you see, what you anticipate may actually be what that person is. And a lot of times we don't know what they are. I was going to tell you, if I came in here today and I had a flowered shirt on and shorts and flip-flops, you would stereotype me a little bit differently. Actually, you'd think I was Dr. Salcido's colleague, but you would stereotype me differently than in a suit. So, but you base that on your past experience and what you see, what you anticipate you think I am without any information. So we're going to give you a little exercise here, if you can help me. Kind of bear with me. This is about a 5-minute video.
Hi, what's your name, darling?
My name is Susan Boyle.
Okay, Susan, where are you from?
I am from Blackburn near Bathgate, West Lothian.
It's a big town.
It's a sort of collection of villages. I had to think there.
And how old are you, Susan?
I am 47. And that's just one side of me.
Okay, what's the dream?
I'm trying to be a professional singer.
And why hasn't it worked out so far, Susan?
I've never been given the chance before, but here's hoping it will change.
Okay, and who would you like to be as successful as?
Elaine Page.
Elaine Page. What are you going to sing tonight?
I'm going to sing I Dreamed a Dream from the Meza.
Okay. Big song.
Yeah? Yes.
I dreamed a dream in time gone by.
You didn't expect that, did you? Did you? No.
without a doubt, that was the biggest surprise I have had in 3 years on the show. When you stood there with that cheeky grin and said, I want to be like Elaine Page, everyone was laughing at you. No one is laughing now. That was stunning, an incredible performance. Amazing. I'm reeling from shock. How about you two? But
I am so thrilled because I know that everybody was against you. I honestly think that we were all being very cynical, and I think that's the biggest wake-up call ever. And I just want to say that it was a complete privilege listening to that. It was brilliant.
Susan, I knew the minute you walked out on that stage that we were going to hear something extraordinary, and I was right.
highlight touch.
Susan, you are a little tiger, aren't you?
I don't know that.
You are. Okay, moment of truth. Here's yes or no.
The biggest yes I have ever given anybody.
Amanda?
Yes, definitely. Brilliant.
Susan Boyle, you can go back to the village with your head held high. It's 3 yeses.
All right. How many of you have seen that before? Wow. Okay, so I wanted to explain what it is. What happened when she walked out on the stage? What was the impression that they got?
Homely.
She was homely? Yeah. Okay, what else? Village idiot. Okay, village idiot. She looked mentally.
When I first saw her, I have this recorded to play behind it now. But she looked mentally deficient, shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And I hope she forgives my.
Yeah. What else? What did you see? What physical characteristics did you identify? Frumpy, yeah. What else?
Old and overweight.
Old, careful with the older, she's only 47. And overweight though, yeah. Anything else? Frizzy hair. My own implicit bias, I tell this every time I do this. For some reason, the unibrow just sticks out to me. Yeah, yeah. She knew what she could do, and they underestimated her. Okay, so imagine a bunch of cops sitting in a room watching this. This is what we do. This is what we show them. And then we ask the same questions. They categorized her. They filled in the blanks. They had no idea of anything about her at all. And their perceptions, could you see the look in the crowd when they showed the faces in the crowd? Yeah, you know, they were going, no, there's no way that she can be a singer. I watched you open your mouth when she was singing, didn't you? This sounds really corny, and I said this before also. I kind of get goosebumps when I watch her sing, because it's just such a complete change. But this is the implicit bias that I talked about. They assigned groups to her, they assigned value to her based on her appearance, because they had no other information. So they filled in the blanks. And do you think they were consciously doing this? No. It happened in the unconscious level. Research has documented implicit bias, or that blink response, is linked to various categories: ethnic, gender, sexual orientation, body shape, age, etc., etc., etc. When I did the research on this program, the next slide is what really hooked me, is what really got me. That implicit bias is relevant not to just law enforcement, but this is to all sorts of different professions: doctors, nurses, medical students. If you think about the Ebola, it started in Denver, or in Dallas, Texas, I believe it was. That patient came in there, and they looked at him, and they thought, oh, you know, he's this and this and this, and they sent him home. And they misdiagnosed him because of his appearance. Lawyers, prosecutors, and judges,
The implicit bias actually affects the way that they deal with people, how they look at people. And I read a study just recently that judges are actually pretty good in giving out sentences and trying to be fair. But school teachers, law enforcement, it goes on and on and on. So implicit bias isn't just for law enforcement. This is what hooked me. This is an everyday occurrence in all our lives, and we have to deal with it. When we're teaching the officers, when we do the class, we talk about several studies. We refer to these studies, we explain them, and I'll go through a couple of them. But black crime implicit bias is one of these that we talk about, and it talks about filling in stimuli, where you don't have any information, so you fill it in. There was a study called the Shove Study, and what they did was they videotaped two people having a conversation. It was a black man and a white man, and the conversation got a little heated, and one of the subjects pushed the other one. Now these were actors, and they practiced this shove. It was more of an ambiguous shove. It wasn't an aggressive shove, it wasn't like a playful shove, it was just kind of ambiguous. And they practiced it so they could do it the same way. And then they showed this video to different people. The video showed the white man shoving the black man, and then other people saw the video of the black man shoving the white man. And then they were supposed to rate the aggressiveness of the shove. And the majority of people perceived the shove to be more aggressive by the black man rather than the white man, even though the shove was actually identical. And when replicated, it was true for both the white and black population. So what it means is that when the study was shown to black individuals, they perceived the shove also as more aggressive by the black person rather than the white person. This blank response, it impacts our perception, it impacts our behavior, it operates below the conscious level, and people who profess to be non-biased, they actually suffer from it also. It affects them. This bias, this implicit bias affects them. In the class, like I said, we do role playing. We have the officers deal with scenarios. We talk about various different kinds of studies to reinforce this. And then we also offer them action plans, things that they can do individually, personally, to lessen this bias. Some of the things we promote are that they go out and contact groups that they're unfamiliar with or they're uncomfortable with before an incident occurs, and become familiar with them. Sit down, talk. You become human to them, they become human to you. The dialogue opens up, it's a lot easier to do. There's also things that we can do to lessen the implicit bias that we have. There's role playing. There's scenario-based role playing that we can do that actually lessens the bias. And then agencies. We talk about what agencies can do. They have to promote fair and impartial policing. They have to change their policies. They have to change the way that they look at people that they hire. The messages have to come from the chief down, that the chief and the command level staff have to attend the training and have to buy into fair and impartial policing. One of the things that this occurs is, for this to occur, is the police cannot do this alone. They have to have the support of the community. And the police officers or the departments, we're encouraging them to reach out to the community, to become more familiar with the community, to open dialogue with the community, and it's going to require that the community respond back to the departments, respond back to the officers, and become involved in this. This isn't going to go away. We have to fix this. In summary, all people, even well-intended people, have bias. It's implicit. It's in the subconscious level. We don't realize that it's occurring. And our Fair and Impartial Policing Initiative, it brings the modern science of bias to instruction to police officers and police departments. Our officers become to understand that policing based on bias or being biased or stereotyping is unsafe, it's ineffective, and it's also unjust. And leaders of law enforcement learn that in light of science, that they can promote fair and impartial policing. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.